Hello, hello.
Oh,
Hello, everybody. Excellent. People coming in now. Sorry, we're starting a little bit late. We've had some technical difficulties with my partner, Marco. Still trying to figure that one out, but we're going to get started shortly. So thanks for your patience.
wonderful.
Russell, nice to see you.
To see you too. Can you hear me?
I hear you. I hear you.
Oh, okay.
How you doing? We seem to be keep running into each other lately.
It's been a few times this the
hmm
last 2 weeks, eh?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. You back in Ottawa now, I'm assuming.
Yeah, back in Ottawa and just finished up having dinner, so we're good.
Awesome.
Looking forward to this what you guys have put together.
Great. Yeah, I'm excited for the presentation. There's my partner in crime, Marco. How you doing?
Doing amazing. How are you?
Great, great, great to have you. All right. Where are we at? 15 people so far. That's a pretty good turnout. I think we can probably get things going. Don't
It's
want to
great.
keep everyone all night, but this is going to be an interesting topic. At least if you're invested or located in the Ottawa area. As I'm sure everyone's aware, we have a new zoning bylaw that's coming into effect. So, uh, without further ado, let's dive in. So this is part of a series that we're calling the Developer Playbook. It's going to be kind of a pretty regular webinar series, mastermind kind of situation, where we talk about all things real estate development, architectural design. Hope to have some guests on future episodes to impart some wisdom, and excited to kick off the first episode of the series. So I'll give a bit of background on myself. My name is Samuel Hirschhorn. I'm a licensed architect and I'm the co-founder of Biosis Real Estate Development, our development company, and Biosis Designs, which is my architecture firm. I've worked on a range of designs and developments over my career, which spans over 13 years. Going from residential to mixed use, I've done some industrial work, institutional projects. University of Guelph was a client of mine for a long time. I mean, this is my wheelhouse. This is where I like to operate, is in the details that come with the zoning bylaw and building codes, and the design world. Um, Marco, I'll pass it over to you. Why don't you give us some background on yourself?
Yes, I see a lot of familiar faces, so just wanted to say hi to everybody. Name is Marco Theodore. I've been working and my background is accounting as well as philanthropy. I have my own non-for-profit operating here, helping Black men and boys just with economic empowerment and socioeconomical empowerment. And as well as very much into the real estate space, transitioned into development and been able to meet a lot of great faces, but a lot of good connections. And now working with Sam and the partners, as well as working with Biosis on bigger, better, and greater things to be able to provide housing to Ottawa, and as well as just crush goals and help investors build wealth.
Awesome. Before we get started, just a quick legal disclaimer. So the information contained in this webinar, it's intended for general informational purposes only. It's not intended to be substituted for professional real estate advice. Although you are speaking to a licensed architect, every project is different. If you've got a specific lot in mind, you're going to want to speak to someone like myself or a city planner, to really understand the nuances that come with your local zoning and your site specific. And then the last thing to note, we're not really going to be talking about giving any investment advice in this presentation, but we also want to make clear that if we do provide some advice, it is just based on our own experience and our own ideas and projections on what we see to be the future, and it's not intended to be advice on your situation or any investments that you might make down the line.
That's right. I was
So
at
what are we
this
going to
event.
cover today, Marco?
Actually, funny about the legal disclaimer. I was at this
Mhm.
event last week and they called it the most expensive slide.
Yeah,
Perfect. And today's agenda, we're going to cover what is the zoning bylaw? Why is it important? We're also going to cover why Ottawa changed the bylaws. We know there's a lot of changes that came into policy, and those are what we're really going to dive in and seeing what the difference is between the old and the new. We're going to take a dive into the neighborhood zones, parking reforms, and housing provisions, as well as some underwriting tips for you to really just to be very aware when looking at your deals, your personal deals. And we're going to look at a couple of case studies and go through our Q&A session where you guys can ask us anything you want, as long as it's bylaw related.
All right. Sounds like we got a lot to unpack here, so let's get
That's right.
started. The big question was, what is the zoning bylaw? But in order to understand the zoning bylaw, we need to understand the entire regulatory framework that comes in the province of Ontario. So right at the very top, the province of Ontario sets the rules. They enact planning legislation that the municipalities must then follow, starting with the Planning Act. And that is the main legislation. That is the big papa that everyone kind of follows after that. Within the Planning Act, you have provincial policy statements. These are the specific rules that come in the Planning Act that then get disseminated amongst the municipal level. And they use that as almost like a template to start crafting their growth plans. And the municipal growth plans have to follow the provincial growth plans. So the province is saying, we want more investment in one area, we want more manufacturing in another area. And then the municipalities say, oh, this kind of falls under my neighborhood. Now, how am I going to break up our boundaries? How are we going to plan for future growth, economic growth, residential growth? That's what the official plan does. It states, land use designation, density targets. It talks about, where do we want to see transportation hubs? What kind of developments do we want in those areas? Where do we want to see agriculture? So when you're looking at a site, the first thing you want to look at is the official plan, because it's going to tell you what the future plans are for the area in which your site resides. After the official plan, that's when the zoning bylaws come into effect. So the zoning bylaws, they're site specific. While they do have a wide range of various designations, depending on what kind of buildings they want to see, the zoning bylaws say exactly what you are allowed to build on your site. So that means, it regulates use, regulates height, density, your setbacks from the property line, how big of a building you can build, how much parking you're required. Very nitty-gritty details that play a big role in any development. So let's talk a bit about that, Marco. What does the effect of the zoning bylaw have on a development project?
So for a development project, it really defines what can be built. We really established that. The zoning bylaw really says, this is your lot, this is what's allowed, and it has to support the vision that the city has when it comes to the official plan. So depending on which zonings that you have, you may be able to build larger density properties, or you may simply just have to go into keeping it as residential. But it controls the value, such as a unit count, your buildable floor area, parking requirement, income streams, and as well as changing zoning bylaws, and can really boost the property value. And so what you may have as original as a single family home can now be intensified in terms of density into what could be like a multiplex. This increases your net operating income, and as well as increases, which we know in the cap rate valuation, that increases the value of your property. It also affects the overall cost, right? When you're developing or when you're building or changing the zoning in an area, the value of the property increases based on what kind of additional work you put into that property itself. So if I'm going from a single family to a multifamily, there's going to be costs associated with it. But these costs can be from anywhere from, if you're building a building, it could be from your site servicing for electrical or even sewers and water. It could also be costs associated with parking and bike storage in the development space as well.
Yeah,
So
I think it's important to highlight that the cost can be very much dependent on what the city tries to impose on you. And I'll give an example on a project that we were working with, another developer on. This was a site in Westboro where the city decided to implement a larger step back than was originally required because of a change in policy where they wanted to highlight more tree planting along a certain public roadway. So that has a big impact because not only is it removing buildable square footage from your site, but you're talking about the root ball of the tree, which then has to be taken into account. So soil depth comes into play, and
Mhm.
now your whole building design changes. You have to redo your whole model. So it's very important to really understand your zoning bylaw and negotiate and work with the city to establish something that's going to be an effective business case for you.
That's right. And then to add into that as well, that's where if you are looking to build something, it may not fit within what the city's requirements or the city's rules may be. You might require some minor variances or some major variances on that, which from there on, this affects timeline. It affects as well as the risk involved within the project. And with longer timeline, we know time is money. So more carrying cost and as well, it can impact the profit and the bottom line for investors, which leads a little bit of uncertainty there.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's dive in into a little bit more detail. So the zoning bylaw change, something that I think everyone needs to know is it didn't come out of the blue. We started off back in I can't like
2019.
2021, 2019.
Yeah, with
It's
the official
they
plan.
complete yeah, the city of Ottawa completely redid their official plan. And the official plan, the new official plan, had some key areas of focus. It was anticipating a large population growth in the city, over 400,000 people projected to come into the city by 2046. So they had to accommodate, they have to plan to accommodate for that sort of growth. And that with that growth, they also want to plan for economic development. You know, the housing was already sky high back in 2019. They could see through their looking glass where it was going. So housing affordability was a critical piece that they want to address as well. Then there's climate change crisis. So how are we building with sustainability in mind? And this is a key concept that they've integrated, the idea of a 15-minute city or a 15-minute neighborhood. And what that means is if you are living in a neighborhood, you should be able to access everything that you need within a 15-minute walk or bus ride. That means groceries, that means employment, that means entertainment, anything that encompasses your daily means of life, they want to see that within a 15-minute radius. So it was, and that's a big overhaul because beforehand, a lot of that city planning was kind of occurring ad hoc. You know, developers would pick up a plot of land and then they would go through an official plan amendment rezoning process based on what they wanted. Well, now the city's flipping it. They're saying, here's what we want. We want to create these hubs and these zones where, communities can really thrive. Let's now simplify the zoning bylaw and streamline that so we don't get all those planning amendment applications coming in and developers start conforming to what we want to see in the city. So this was a huge move by the city, but it didn't really get a whole lot of spotlight and attention. Um, but now that this is in place, it took about 5 years, but they've completely revamped the zoning bylaw to follow this model that they've laid out. So to kind of illustrate this, this is the old Ottawa zoning bylaw map. And you can kind of see, the zones divided into multiple residential zones, different environmental areas. You've got industrial areas. The blue is your arterial mains, and it's kind of sprinkled all over the place. Like you can see there are some larger chunks of reds and purples where, the main city centers are, but there's no real cohesion here. Whereas now, when they're introducing the new zoning philosophy, which follows the official plan, so now they're looking to increase densities, they're looking to add more trees, kind of one of those changes I mentioned earlier. They're revamping and merging a lot of the secondary plans into the main zoning bylaw, creating fewer zones, more broader categories. They're changing how buildings are defined in the zoning bylaw. It's no longer a focus on use, it's now about massing. So they set more constraints on the size of the building and not so much the use or the density within it, depending on the zone.
Right.
So
And to highlight
yes.
this in a different method, in a different perspective, think about that the new official plan into two sectors. Building a neighborhood that is sustainable, that somebody could have all of their amenities within a walking distance, and the second, building the infrastructure in order to support that. And so that's the way I see the zoning bylaw. And just like it really entails like if I wanted to be somewhere, what would make it easier for me to live, what would make everything accessible, and what would make my family being able to access groceries, education, transportation as well, and a little bit and a few more things.
And that's a great segue into this map. So this
Mhm.
map was taken from the official plan, and you can see the comparison between the first map that I showed you and this one, where now it's highlighting these corridors, these transit nodes with all the little dots. All of the purple lines here, these are your main streets, your big flows of traffic. And then around them, that's where you're starting to see what we call hub zones. So hub zones are your high density, mixed use commercial, residential, very active offices, a lot of economic activity going along on there. And they're concentrated around these major streets and these major transit stations. But as you move out of the downtown and out of the major cores, you still have these neighborhood mixed use zones. So they want to accommodate that economic activity that's happening along the main streets and along transit ways. So within those neighborhood mixed use zones, you're going to have these sub neighborhood categories, usually N5 or N6, that allows for mid-rise or high-rise developments, and still permits that commercial usage. And then as you move outside, further away from the main streets, that's where you get your more traditional neighborhood zones. So whereas these used to be R1, R2 residential, first, second, third, fourth density, now you've got neighborhood first, second, third, fourth. It also represents density, but the difference is it's not strictly telling you what building typology you need. It sets the boundaries under which you can develop. So I kind of touched on this. So neighborhoods N1 to N4, that's your low scale. You're talking multiplexes, small apartments, stacked units. This now allows up to 11-meter max height. So that's 3 stories as of right. They want to encourage those walk-up type units. And then as you move to the N5, this is your mid-rise neighborhood scale, where you're allowed to build up to 30 meters. And then N6, that's your high-rise designation. And within these zones, you have subzones, and they're using the subzones as a way to be more flexible. When you go in, maybe you're building that you've designed, that there are things that constrain the site further, right? It's your access to services, your driveways, your loading zones. They create the subzones as to offer flexibility. So you don't need to go through a rezoning process for something that doesn't quite fit a minor variance, but is too little to do a full rezoning for. And so that's when they can create exceptions and create subzones. So the main changes between the new bylaw and the old one, it's an emphasis on form and scale rather than excluding certain residential building types. And there are, conditionally permitted non-residential uses to create that 15-minute vibrant neighborhood. So this is taken from, a presentation that the city did, and it kind of highlights how they are envisioning neighborhoods to transform. So you can see by 2046, all of the single family homes that are currently existing there, they want to see that start to change. They want to see these smaller 3-story walk-ups, these multiplexes, backyard ADUs start to go in. As well on the main streets, you're allowed to go now up to 6 stories and create these small scale apartment buildings. So that's the inner urban section. That's this light yellow section here. And then on the outer urban, which is kind of this orangey yellow section, they anticipate less density, but they're not restricting what you can build again. They're still looking for that mix of apartment versus single family home versus small multiplex. So it's really opening up the entire city for densification and different housing types to address the housing crisis that we have right now. Then moving to closer to the downtown core, but mainly along transit areas, that's where you get these mixed use zones. So you have your hub zones, which is your urban centers, the main street zones, which are obviously along the major transit corridors. Those are more the urban densification. And then outside of that, you've got the minor corridors where you still have quite a bit of traffic and flow. It may be not a main street, but they still want to see that added density. And then lastly, you've got your neighborhood mixed use zones, again, to foster that 15-minute neighborhood. So these zones, they're now explicitly designed to combine residential, non-residential uses, support that mid and high-rise density form. Your residential use integration is expected, and it adopts a more form-based approach. And what this means for developers, it's actually advantageous. So if you are doing a mixed use development, you can still access CMHC financing and get the best financing terms out there. CMHC allows up to 30% of the building to be a commercial use as long as it's on the ground floor. And so if you're doing ground floor commercial and then levels 2 to 6 residential, not only can you take advantage of commercial triple net lease tenants, but you can also take advantage of the residential grade financing that CMHC MLI has to offer. On the city side, it creates a much more direct pathway to approval. So whereas your site plan approval would take years, 2, 3, 4 years to get through because of going through all of this process of trying to redefine your site, now it's a lot clearer. It's a lot clearer what's going to be allowed, what's going to require a minor variance application versus what isn't, and there's more flexibility within that for the city to actually process your application. And then I mentioned CMHC financing, got a little ahead of myself. One of the other major changes to this bylaw that interests all developers is that they have removed from most areas, they have removed a minimum parking requirement. And instead, they've put in place a maximum parking requirement. So this is the city's effort saying, we are sick and tired of this addiction that we have to cars and vehicular traffic. We've invested heavily in this robust light rail transit system, the OC Transpo bus system, and we want people to use it. And this couples with that 50-minute neighborhood concept where you can walk to get to all your amenities, you can take the bus, and it's a lot easier than taking a car. And now they're kind of pushing developers to support that by eliminating parking. And as a developer, this is kind of a double-edged sword. So whereas I was constantly having to go to the city and ask for relief on parking, I don't want to do a 2 to 1 or 1.5 ratio per unit because parking's very expensive, takes up a lot of space. Oftentimes you're breaking even at best, more likely detracting from the project. So for many, many years, it was always applying to the city on a minor variance to reduce the parking count. Well, now it's the opposite. Now I'm going to be going to the city saying, hey, I need more parking on my site. Which is kind of a good thing and kind of a bad thing. The good thing is that, yeah, our dependence on cars has really gone too far. On the other hand, now if I'm building a residential apartment and I want to remain competitive with one of the older stock that has these 2-level parking garages, I need to provide at least some parking for my tenants. Like we all drive cars where we don't have the robust underground subway system of Japan or Tokyo, or I was even in Barcelona a few months ago, and you can get everywhere on the subway. We don't have that here, unfortunately, so we're still quite dependent on cars. And if I do a 60-unit apartment building with 0 parking, well, the high quality tenants are likely to have a car, so they're going to pick a different building that provides parking. So that's the struggle as a developer. And if you're thinking about a project, you really want to keep in mind who your tenant base is, who you're trying to attract, and how you can fit parking within that business case.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, I love this because it kind of transitions to the next slide, which is some of the notable changes that are housing to the housing provision,
Hmm.
which we understand that the city is taking a very aggressive approach to density. And so with that, the city also has to look at these individual lots and say, hey, if we want to have more density, what can we permit on these lots? Now we see that in fully serviced N1 to N6 zones, which is the new zonings, 4 units are allowed per lot, which means you could have a unit with three, you could have a property with 3 units originally and be able to add that coach home. Coach home is, maybe you probably heard it a different way, maybe a laneway house or a tiny home in the backyard, whichever way you understood this. But it's great because that increase of density allows for investors an opportunity that we haven't seen anywhere before. And in most cities, we haven't seen this anywhere before as well. Toronto did a zoning bylaw change, I think, a few years ago,
No,
just to allow coach
it's
home.
September. September it officially passed and
Officially,
was
right. It
adopted.
just,
Yeah.
and that was a few years ago, they just had allowed coach home. But in the terms of its density, it hasn't seen anything like this. Like we're a fifth of the size of Toronto, and we're looking at increasing our size way more aggressive than Toronto. And for that, it takes these aggressive changes, such as coach homes. We'll also see something that in other housing changes that we've seen is we have allowed for, you can switch to the next slide. Sorry, Sam. uh, we've allowed for properties to make, like, create easier townhouses. So whether it's a 3 unit townhome or long semis or semis in a row, townhome row configuration, the city has really allowed for that. Now, especially in corner lots, you'll see that in many corner lots, you'll see properties that have turned into that are going to turn into multiple unit townhomes. And this is great. But there's also configurations such as group homes will be accepted everywhere that a residential property is allowed. This is huge. As our population is increasing in age, we need ways to sustain that. We don't have retirement homes, they're not as popular, or they're not as common now as they need to be, or they're not being built as fast as they need to be. In order to support our aging population, we need to also look at the zoning in the perspective that allows for group homes or smaller assisted living homes everywhere around. There's also the aspect of rooming houses, which are now allowed anywhere around the city. So from your N1 zoning to N4, you will have a maximum of 1 rooming house per building.
And this is
Some of,
a pretty big change. So
yeah,
the city of Toronto recently implemented a legislation to limit rooming houses because they were worried that you would get too many of these developers coming in and building these 6, 7, 8 bedroom houses in these residential neighborhoods, and they didn't really want to see it. They wanted more family-oriented homes. And there is a provision here that I'm sure you'll touch on next about that. But the interesting thing is here, City of Ottawa says, okay, we have 2 universities and a college. We have a population of students that come in for 8 months of the year, maybe longer, and they're not all looking to rent a 2 bedroom apartment or a 1 bedroom apartment. Sometimes they just want to rent a room in an apartment. So that's what this is gearing towards. They're saying it's okay. We promote student rentals because we understand that they're a big part of our population.
absolutely, absolutely. I think Sam comes from the era of 2 university. I think we're around 4 right now.
Or is that right?
St. Paul University, I think, is another one as well. So
No kidding.
Sam
Yeah,
did his education here in Ottawa, so he knows Ottawa.
yeah, yeah. I went to Carleton, so I know Carleton. My wife went to Ottawa U, and then Algonquin College. My business partner went to Algonquin College. So those are the ones that I'm aware of. I didn't know they added more.
Yeah, man. And so there's other changes that are continue. So if we go to the next slide, there's continued changes that are
Well,
there. And
before we move on, there's one last important piece, and that's the large dwelling unit
right.
requirement. Yeah, if you want to touch on that.
That's right. So a large unit requirement, dwelling unit requirement, is essentially saying that in at least most of the building, there needs to be more accessible rooming. So if you have a property right now, they're looking to build more properties with more units because those are for more long-term tenants. So 3 bedrooms are required for at least 5% of all your units in mid and high rise. And if you have a low rise building, you're looking around 15% of your unit must be 3 or plus bedroom. This is going to sustain families because we know that families usually need more than just 1 bedroom, and this is great for us. And as investors as well, we know that what the opportunity is there. We have long-term tenants, people that have 3 or plus bedroom units. They're there for the long term. Yes, they're preparing maybe for buy a house in the next 5, 10 years, but at least you know you'll have a tenant that is there long term with a sustainable approach to your underwriting.
Yeah, it's really a push to provide more housing options to people, and they want to support families with kids. That's what this is for. Most developers understand that building a 3 unit rental isn't exactly economically viable. Like the rents that you get doesn't really make sense compared to a 1 bedroom or 2 plus den. It's a higher cost per square foot, but again, your what you can get on the market doesn't really quite cut it. So this push actually came as a bit of a letdown to us as developers, mandating that we do these 3 bedroom apartments. We're now entering into an appeal period. Maybe we'll see that relaxed a bit, maybe not. But it's just the new reality that we'll have to contend with on future designs.
Yeah. One of the most underrated change that I've seen in the zoning bylaw is what is actually permitted on lots. So this is very, very good because as investors, we usually look at things like, hey, how much money can I get on this property? Can I turn it into residential? Can I turn it into commercial? But what has changed and is undervalued is what's actually possible in terms of your neighborhood. We've added that the city really wants to make these neighborhood very, how do I say, accommodable, right? And so in order to make great accommodation in the neighborhood, you also have to provide a lot more value than just residential values. And so what are some of the examples that you're going to see in the permitted uses is that where you would have in the past an R1 or to a R3, so probably a single family, a duplex or a triplex. Now you have the opportunity to maximize value in those neighborhoods. These increases in value includes flexible permission, allowing to a complete change. So what you would have before as a single family dwelling can now have a daycare, a dwelling multi-dwelling unit. It can even have a small school or daycare. And as well as different zones, you might even be able to go into banks, community centers, institutions like education, medical facilities. So when you're looking at, let's look at an area like, if you are familiar with Ottawa, let's look at an area like Vanier, right? Vanier has become this very dense area where there's only really 2 main streets, which is the Montreal Road and as well as what's the other one? There's another street near the Rockwood area, but in between those neighborhoods, there's nothing really that supports with like a commercial space, like an office space. There's no smaller medical facilities. You really have to be on these 2 main streets in order to get access to those. What this zoning bylaw allows you to do is you can even create a corner store down the street so that somebody can come and get groceries, right? You could have a small pharmacy. You could have you can even have a permissible, in certain areas, it's permissible for you to even have a church. So creating community is really the focus of the zoning bylaw. And for us as investors, we have to look at areas like what is missing, what would really add value to my neighborhood, and how can I make this work? And that's where we transition really to the underwriting of your development or your property.
Yeah, and again, this is just a tip if you're thinking about, a development or an investment that hinges on these changes and is affected by it. You want to, for something like adding a coach house or an ADU, there's a lot of excitement around, yes, we can do it, we can add it as of right, get it built quickly. But then you have to really look at, does the cost versus the income make sense? Who's actually going to be renting these backyard garden suites? Is it going to be a student? Is it going to be a family that's going to rent the main house and then they've got a kid that or grandparents who will rent the backyard ADU? And then you want to make sure you're positioning the business case towards that tenant as opposed to the idea of if you build it, they will come, because oftentimes that's not the case. They don't come. So be very careful about your strategy and how you're thinking through that process. On the rooming house side, it's a similar situation. Who's your target tenant base? Is there demand? You don't want to position this as to try and attract families when it's a rooming house, right? No one, you want to gear it towards those younger students or people who are just emigrating into the country looking for kind of a transit oriented dwelling unit. And then the large dwelling unit requirements, again, I touched on this, 3 bedrooms. They're tough to make the numbers work, but if you can make the business case and find the families who are willing to rent a 3 bedroom apartment versus a house, maybe there aren't single family homes in your area where you're developing, so this product would make more sense for them. So we're now going to talk a bit about one of the projects that we've been working on. So this is a project my architecture firm has been designing for another client. They have a single family house that's located in a residential neighborhood towards the south end, around the Walkley St. Laurent area. This house is on an oddly shaped lot. In the existing zoning bylaw, it's R2F residential, and now in the new zoning bylaw, it's neighborhood 2 with a subzone C. So what does that mean? Well, in the original bylaw, we were restricted. We were allowed to do up to 3 units per lot. So that's it. Like 3 units per lot has to be in a single family home configuration with 2 accessory dwelling units. Very restrictive. Other rules that applied, you can't have front yard parking. You either need a garage or you need to park in the side yard. You had to have a certain frontage. You had to have an area for planting trees. That's all been changed with the implementation of the new bylaw. Now it becomes a calculation based on the land area. So we're now allowed to do 1.5 units per 100 square meter lot, and this is a 545 square meter lot, which permits 5 units. Great, that's a lot better. Now you're adding units, you're adding more income, but we went a step further. We looked at the lot and we decided if we split the lot, build 2 semi-detached buildings, each is now allowed up to 4 units per lot, which would give us a total of 8. And that's where things really start to make a lot of sense financially. And this is still permitted. In fact, we're as of right in everything except for the frontage. We're required to have a minimum of 10-meter frontage. This property here, we got plenty of space. It's this one here, we're only at 9. So we will have to go for a minor variance to get this approved, but everything else is as of right. In our original design, we had units in the basement, main floor, and second floor. We're actually going to be popping this up, get a third floor, and that's how you get 4 units per side. And this is a semi-detached building, so we will create a 2-hour firewall splitting the building into 2. So this is one of the strategies that the city is actually promoting. They want that added density. We're planting 2 trees here, so they give us the thumbs up. We love trees. We still have parking, but we don't need parking. In fact, we're now thinking, maybe we do away with the parking entirely because there is a transit stop. It's a few blocks away. So that's one great strategy if you've got a single family home on an oversized lot and you want to sever it, do a multiplex. The numbers are looking quite strong there. Marco, why don't you tell them about a higher density project that we have on the go?
Yeah, this is another project that we have on the go. This right here was originally a triplex sitting on a half an acre lot. Now, in the original bylaw, it was zone R3A, which means only 3 units per lot, which means essentially this half acre has been maximized in terms of its usage when looking at the old bylaw. Now, with the new bylaw being the minor corridor number 2, there is no minimum of terms of units that you can do, but it has a maximum of 20 meters in height, which means for us as an investor, we're looking at what is the way that we can maximize the density on this lot. Now, our strategy here is to build a 64 unit apartment on 6 stories. Yes. So we've gone from maximizing a 3 unit half acre lot to being able to do 64 unit on a single lot, which is a huge boost in value add, and as well as providing a lot of units and a lot of rental homes to residents of Ottawa. Now, as you can see, of course, everything still has to be as of right. We still have our frontage, our side yards, and the backyard requirements. And this is what we really work with when it comes to the new zoning bylaw. That's what we work with in order to provide maximum value on a lot. This is actually where the Manda Villa project is taking place. And this case study is very personal to me as we've worked on this for many years. But in the old zoning bylaw, if we wanted to do something anywhere close, we're actually maximized at 24 units on 4 stories, and we'd have to do a whole zoning bylaw amendment to get there. So just by the zoning bylaw being amended from the city level, we've been able to near triple the amount of units being on this lot. So
Yeah.
incredible value add. And is there anything else you want to add, Sam? I'm just so
Yeah,
excited.
I want to point out that it's one of the changes in the new bylaw that it was changed from draft 2 to draft 3 is the required landscape buffer around the parking. So originally we had 24 spots. Our parking, we had a drive aisle that was coming along the side of the building, and then we had a larger parking lot. And then they came and said, no, you need a 3.5 meter setback from the property line around all parking and driveways. So it further constrained the site. Having 20 parking spots, it's going to be probably more than what most of our competitors like. There isn't really another development like this in the area. And we still provide parking, so we will attract a higher tenant base, but it just kind of shows how the mindset has completely shifted at the city and how that does impact a pro forma. If most of these 6 story projects that are going up are going to have very limited amount of parking. So we got lucky on this lot. It's very deep. It allows for that rear parking. But other projects, you got to keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what are the best strategies going forward? Well, when reviewing the bylaw in the context of the bylaw, they're really pushing for that missing middle infill project. So, taking a small single family house, turning it into a 60-unit apartment building, or taking, a small single family house and turning it into a fourplex. All those strategies they are actively promoting. Those small to mid-rise apartments that they aren't super offensive to locals. It's not a high rise. It's not going to cast massive shadows. You're not dramatically increasing the traffic in the area because they've limited parking. But these are projects that look really good on a pro forma. And also, if you do have a property, it's within that hub zone on a major transit station, nearby a major transit station, you could be going up 20, 25, 30 stories. So there's lots of opportunity there. And then that co-living, student housing kind of model, that's also getting promoted to expand. So where can people find more information on the bylaw?
Yeah, so if you are looking to get a little bit more information on the bylaw, there is a website called Engage Ottawa that will give you a direct link to the Ottawa's new zoning bylaw. But in other words, we also wanted to provide a little bit of resources that you, as an investor, you can start looking around to see what's possible, whether it's in your own personal home or a lot that you're looking into. So one of them is the interactive zoning map. And this right there is you'll be able to look at the changes. And it also, the great thing about this resource is it'll give you what's there currently with the old bylaw and what the changes are permitted on the new bylaw. So you can look at what opportunities really come forward.
Yeah, and this is what it looks like. You type in your address, it'll give you the old bylaw and a link to look at what that was, and then it'll give you the new bylaw and a link to look it up, and it'll take you directly there. So no more are you fumbling through a PDF document trying to figure out, where do I find the map? Where do I learn my zoning? Yeah, it's all provided in that in this link here. So yeah, if you want to look up a property, yeah, I encourage you to use that resource. All right. And that wraps up our presentation. So a lot to unpack there. We obviously didn't go deep into any one specific area of the bylaw, but that's something that you'd have to do. Ideally with a property in mind, and that is something that we do for clients as well. But let's open it up if there's any questions, even if you've got a project in mind, you want to bounce some thoughts off of us, we're open to that as well.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, you could just unmute yourself and ask away. We'll be happy to answer all your questions.
I just wanted to thank you guys for unpacking it for us. I mean, I wanted to see, growing up in Ottawa and whatnot, I just wanted to see what the new bylaws were all about. So thank you for walking through it.
Our pleasure. Thanks for joining the call, Scott.
No, not a problem.
Ian Jones wrote, what are the DC incentives?
Yeah, so the province has provided a framework for getting development charge discounts based on providing rental units. So that discount ranges from, if you're doing a studio, I think it's about 15% or 10%. If you're doing a one bedroom, it's 15, a two bedroom, 20%, and then a three bedroom, you get up to 25% discount on that development charge. So for developers, it's a big bonus, right? Development charges end up being something like almost 15 to 20% of a project cost. So it does help. With the city of Ottawa, unfortunately, before that came into full effect, they decided to increase their development charges by 20%. So now you're kind of just paying the old rate. But a discount is a discount. Every little bit helps, right? Well, I think, yeah, a lot of information, hard to come up with questions on the spot. I think we'll let everybody get back to their evening. We will be circulating a recording of this presentation, and we will circulate the slides as well, so you can click on that link and go and play with the zoning bylaw. Our contact information it will be provided to you if you've got any further questions or want to run any projects by us. Feel free to reach out. You can also visit our website at www.biosisrealestate.com.
Yeah, we also got a question from Russ before we head out. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
And it is, what about appeals?
Yeah, so the appeals process, that's the stage we're at now. It's been approved by council, and now there's a timeline for people to register appeals. Those appeals will be taken up by the Ontario Land Tribunal. And we don't quite know how long that's going to be, but the City of Toronto just went through this process with their zoning bylaw amendment. And that actually was settled about 2 months ahead of schedule. So when the appeals process started, I think it was January 2025. It was projected to go until almost December 2025, but it got settled in the first, actually, it was in August, I believe. And that appeal process, they kept it to site specific rather than the entire zoning bylaw as a whole. The only thing is it did hold up the full adoption and implementation, but there weren't sweeping changes through the settlement. It was all site specific that they created these exceptions. And I expect that's what's going to happen here. They're not going to rewrite the whole bylaw. They're going to create these exceptions and these subzones as a way to settle any appeals.
Just a reminder that to everybody that this was unanimously voted on. So there's a lot of support from the city level and as well as people within the city, residents in the city that want to see greater density and that want to see Ottawa change to be able to accommodate for more housing and better neighborhoods. So very, very
Definitely.
great news for us.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Really appreciate you hopping on the call. Yeah, let's build some more housing and keep investing in Ottawa's growth. And I think it's a bright future ahead. All right. Take care, everybody.